Clare Crawley calls out Matt James following dating speculation amid his reunion with Rachel Krirkonnell. Hey guys, welcome back to another shared news from home. We have all the details on the latest drama, but before we get into it, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. As always, I am your host, Fiona Zaring, and I'm joined by the wonderful Avery Grooms. Avery, there is a lot to unpack here. Let's just dive right in. First things first, in case you guys are not totally up to date, a woman has come forward with claims that she was casually dating Matt before he went off to film his season of The Bachelor. And she's saying that they have been in touch, and talking again since the season ended. She actually went live with Reality Steve and explained that it was seeing Matt and Rachel reunited in New York City that made her feel the need to come forward. She told Steve,
I saw that he was trying to get back together with Rachel, and it just didn't sit right with me. I just felt like Rachel was so in love with him, and for him to be trying to contact me and hang out with me, someone who's had past romantic relationships with 2 days prior in Miami, it didn't sit right with me, and I felt like I had to say something for Rachel's sake.
So the timeline she's sort of setting up there is that obviously we all saw those photos of Rachel and Matt together in New York. They were keeping it very low key, but right before that, Matt had reached out to her, and that just, I guess, didn't feel right, didn't sit right. So Avery, this is all fairly interesting. I mean, what do you make of this?
This is some tea. I feel like for the most part in this, Matt kind of had the cleaner, safer image, but this kind of just turns everything around. She came out with the receipts pretty much by having an interview with Reality Steve and kind of came forward and did the right thing in the situation. But now it's kind of like we're looking at him like he's the bad guy just because he kind of steered us the wrong direction. He's feeding the media one story, trying to push this clean image when he's kind of playing multiple girls after the show. So it's just kind of crazy. I thought this was going to go one way based off the photos. We thought, him and Rachel might be getting back together, but then this kind of all came out. So I don't really know what to think anymore. I honestly feel bad for Rachel.
Yeah, here's the thing that really is sticking out to me is Matt has been very clear, crystal clear, no room, wiggle room whatsoever in all interviews he's done since the show, that he's not talking to anybody. He's not looking for anything. He's really just focusing on himself. So just the fact that he's sort of been in touch with this woman sort of makes that in and of itself questionable a little bit, right? Why reach out to her if you are saying very publicly that you're, keeping it all off the table, you're not interested in seeing anyone, reconnecting with anybody, you're just looking at you. Then you factor in the fact, that he and Rachel sort of reconnected, and it just, I don't know, it raises eyebrows in a way that we haven't really had with Matt up until this point. So it is interesting. Since the fallout from her Steve interview and, questions being raised online by fans, let's face it, we're all on the pulse of everything happening. Sources have come forward sort of shedding some light on what Matt's side of the story is, how Rachel's feeling. So let's get into this. Us Weekly is reporting that Rachel is very hurt and feels manipulated because she and Matt were allegedly talking about a future together. Another source said Rachel is very emotional right now because she was very hopeful that things were going to work out. She's still trying to process this. So that kind of adds to the narrative that Rachel and Matt have been in touch since after the final rose. They've been talking about things. They've been FaceTiming a lot. There are all sorts of source reports out there right now claiming varying degrees of connection and communication between Matt and Rachel after the show ended. But another source is also telling Us Weekly that Matt tried to make it clear to her that he just wants to be friends, that he is a caring and supportive person, so he wouldn't want to block her out of his life completely. So, it feels very miscommunication-y here, right? Because based on what the sources are saying, it kind of feels like Rachel never fell out of love with Matt. She made that clear on After the Final Rose. It feels like in her eyes, she was making that clear to him that pursuing a relationship is still what she wanted. But Matt was just like, I care about you. I'm here to be a friend kind of thing. I mean, is that what you're kind of making of this, Avery? It feels very messy.
Very, very messy. I mean, we basically have three different stories here, one from Rachel, one from Grace, and one from a source of Matt's. And I mean, if we're going to take Rachel's side, he has been talking to her the whole time, but he's telling press something else. And maybe he was in contact with Grace. I think we could take a little from each, but if we do that, it is very messy. And at the end of the day, I think he's going to get mainly caught up in this because it's their word against his at this point. That's what makes the most sense. And he hasn't really spoke on Grace yet or seeing Rachel. So we'll have to see.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Avery. Matt hasn't said a word since any of this has unfolded. Obviously, we have to take anything that comes from sources with a grain of salt because we just, don't really know. So I think the perfect word here is messy. I think more details are going to be coming to light. And it's all going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. But in the meantime, Clare Crawley has made her thoughts on this entire situation very, very clear. A Twitter user reminded, fellow fans that Clare had tried to warn them about Matt in the past, and she couldn't help but respond to this tweet. She reposted it on Friday, and she added a shrug and smirk emoji for emphasis. So if we think back, obviously Matt was going to be a contestant on Clare's season before it was postponed and before he obviously ended up being the Bachelor. And Clare, way back when, made headlines for seemingly taking aim at him in a tweet. At the time, she shared, if you are doing interviews and creating cameo accounts before you are even on my season, you are in it for the wrong reasons. Hashtag don't waste your time. She then kind of backtracked, clarified that this was about multiple men. It was a general thought, that it wasn't directed at Matt, but at that time it felt like the narrative had kind of taken off that Clare was not a fan of Matt's, and of course he was later announced to be the Bachelor, a few months post these tweets. Clare is someone we've seen take subtle steps to make her thoughts known on social media. We've talked about before her liking tweets here and there that have very pointed messages. But she went so far as to repost this fan's tweet that she had tried to warn everyone about Matt. I mean, it doesn't get clearer than that. What do you make of this, Avery? I mean, she is so clearly not team Matt James.
Yeah, originally I would just be like, okay, this is Clare just talking on Twitter, whatever, not think too much of it. But now, looking at it under this new light, I have to say, I don't say this often, but she does have a point, and now it's kind of putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. If you are doing interviews and creating cameo accounts before even going on the show, you aren't probably there for the right reasons. You are probably in it for fame. And that kind of goes along with the story that he's over here telling Rachel one thing, but telling the press the other thing. Like, what did he actually want out of this entire thing? Was it love? Was it fame? And right now it's kind of looking more like fame.
Yeah, I have to say it's going to be really interesting to see what Matt does next, right? Because I think he's earned a lot of goodwill from Bachelor Nation. He's obviously been put through, regardless of anything happening after the fact, his season and all of the fallout and all of the difficult emotions behind all of that are still very valid, and he's carried a lot of weight on his shoulders. But the question is, why has it gotten messy? What's been going on behind the scenes with him and Rachel? We saw that they had a connection. We saw those real emotions on After the Final Rose. Have there been, just to put it simply, some missteps in navigating that after the fact? It's totally possible. Hopefully we get some more details soon. Because I'd like to still believe in Matt. We haven't had a lot of good Bachelors to root for of late. I would like to still believe in Matt. So you guys, that's everything we have for now, but I'm very hopeful that we will have more for you in the near future. On that note, though, we want to know what you make of all of this. What do you think of these messy details with the new woman, with the Rachel reunion? And honestly, what do you make of Clare's tweet? Because she really put it all out there. Let us know down in the comments. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell, because like I said, we're going to do our best to keep you updated on all things Bachelor Nation. As always, I am your host, Fiona Zaring. I was joined by the wonderful Avery Grooms. If you want to come say hi, our social handles are on the screen right now. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.